It's finally time to dive into Elliott Smith's 1997 classic album, Either Or. The first track, Speed Trials, is an understated kickoff to the album that actually hides a surprising level of complexity in plain sight, from the song structure to the guitar part and, of course, the enigmatic lyrics. There will be a full playthrough at the end with chord charts. Let's get started. While Roman Candle and the self-titled album made a big impact in the Portland music scene, Either Or was the album that saw Elliott Smith break into more mainstream success. As most fans are probably aware, those first two albums were made with considerable limitations, Roman Candle being recorded entirely on his own with 4 tracks, and self-titled on 8. The lo-fi, sparse sound that resulted from those DIY recordings imbued the albums with an intimacy that lent itself to Elliott Smith's songwriting style. But as Larry Crane points out, he always aspired to create cleaner-sounding records.
The roughness of an inexpensive Yamaha acoustic guitar, a 57 on the guitar, like simpler, cheaper equipment, kind of gives it a sort of charm in a way, or makes it feel very intimate, like, oh, this is just a guy recording at his home. But I don't think he ever felt like, oh, the charm in one of these songs is that you can really hear the guitar scrapes on the chord changes, or there's so much hiss on Satellite, and that's really cool. That was never an Elliott Smith kind of conversation, I can guarantee you. You know, he would talk about records he liked, and they had fidelity to them. The Zombies, the Beatles, you know, they were records that had a lot of clarity. I mean, go look for an interview with him where he says something like, oh, I really had to record on 4-track to make it sound authentic. You're never gonna fucking find that. You know, that doesn't exist.
So, after the self-titled album saw some success, partly due to heavy promotion by the Kill Rock Stars record label, Elliott Smith was able to record many of his next batch of songs in bigger studios with better equipment. This included a couple local studios working with familiar names like Larry Crane, as well as The Shop in Northern California, where most of the record was mixed. Here's some footage I found of a band called 12 Volt Sex recording and mixing an album there around the same time. Either Or has a noticeable boost in recording clarity and depth of arrangements, with many tracks having layered acoustic and electric guitars, organ or keyboard, bass, drums, and choir-style backing vocals. It's impressive that all these layers fit together so tightly when Elliott was still playing almost everything you hear on the record himself, overdubbing one track after another. In addition to the catchy songwriting and higher recording budget, this album's broader exposure is mainly thanks to Gus Van Sant deciding to use it heavily in the soundtrack to 1997's Good Will Hunting.
Let's talk about this first and foremost, your contribution to the Good Will Hunting soundtrack.
Right.
I'm assuming that happened since you're from Portland and Gus Van Sant is from Portland, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you guys were buddies?
Yeah, I knew him from there. He'd come see me play stuff, so.
And he said, if I ever make a movie with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, you're the man we're going to go to.
Van Sant started living and making films in Portland around the same time Elliott began his career there. Good Will Hunting would launch many careers, not just Elliott Smith's. Van Sant previously had what Wikipedia calls indie and art house success with his early films, but Good Will Hunting would blow all previous films away in terms of both critical and commercial success. It was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, including Elliott Smith's nomination for Miss Misery, and won Robin Williams' only Oscar, Best Supporting Actor, as well as Best Screenplay for Newbies Matt Damon and
Ben Affleck.
Van Sant fell in love with Elliott Smith's music after picking him out of a batch of Portland artists and urged his editor to use Elliott's music throughout the movie as much as possible.
2 albums, which were Elliott, and they sounded so mellow and so cool. And also when you're on a trip, you listen to stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is like, it's like Simon and Garfunkel, or it's, you know, like it's like amazing. I had told the editor, try to use Elliott's music, because I think in preparing Good Will Hunting, I was listening already to his music, and I thought this is like the type of thing that you could like use it through the whole movie. I was like, no, put Elliott in like everywhere.
Speed Trials is the first track on Either Or, and it was also the album's first single. For anyone who'd heard Elliott Smith's music before, it probably served as a somewhat deceptively smooth transition from the sound of his first 2 albums. This was the case for me as well, since I first listened to his albums in chronological order. Like his first 2 records, Speed Trials is sparse, featuring doubled acoustic guitar, his signature quiet doubled vocal, and a tiny drum set of just snare and cymbal played with brushes. There's also the familiar sound of relatively low-quality audio, with the snare drum being completely blown out in this clip. Just as with many songs on the self-titled album, the simple recording style belies some really dense and strange songwriting. Let's look at the opening lyrics. These 4 lines form a single, beautiful sentence, packed with imagery and many possible interpretations. Taken literally, we picture 2 people meeting in a dark cathedral beneath a horse occupying the space of some deity or idol. We imagine the sweet high notes reverberating in the large open space. Another interpretation is that these lyrics depict someone using heroin, also known as horse, muting their ability to connect with others under its effects. The sweet high notes are the sizzling sound of the drug being melted by their master before shooting up, gradually destroying them. The use of the third person makes it further unclear who he's depicting, potentially an out-of-body view of himself or a different person entirely. As I've said several times in this series, the idea that all Elliott Smith songs are autobiographical is one he himself had to push back on throughout his career in many interviews. For example, many people who heard the self-titled album assumed he was a junkie when at the time he wasn't using any hard drugs, but was surrounded by economic hardship and drug abuse at the time in Portland. His ability to bring to life the stories and perspectives of others is, I think, the most underappreciated aspect of his songwriting. A full lyrical analysis of this song could easily take up its own video, but it's time to get into the guitar part. The tuning is open C, but in the first cool twist of the song, it begins in E minor, a closely related key. We start off with a minor pentatonic riff. Then when the singing comes in, we get a big low C, followed by some surprising chords. Earlier, I said the song begins in E minor, but it's actually not that simple. The tonality of this song is so obscure that it grabbed the attention of Dr. Rob Schultz, a music theorist and professor who is one of the most significant scholars of Elliott Smith's music before his tragic death from cancer in 2016 at the age of 38. In this paper, Schultz cites classical pianist Christopher O'Reilly. O'Reilly thus attributes the song's ambiguous mood to the phenomenon of tonal pairing, which applies to music based on, quote, not one stable sonority, but on the tension between 2 tonal centers. The lack of chordal accompaniment and thus tonal context in the guitar tattoo renders it plausibly construed as either 1, 3, 4, 5 in E minor, or 3, 5, 6, 7 in C major. By the way, any fellow music theory nerds or guitar players, can anyone explain the use of tattoo here? Schultz seems to be using it to mean riff or something. Anyway, digging into the rest of the song, the ambiguity only deepens. The final 2 chords of the verse phrase are A flat to a kind of G, which could either be a very unusual move in E minor or a much more common but somewhat unusual cadence in C major. To my ear, the melody in the verse emphasizes E so strongly with the octave E jump that the verse feels like E minor to me. The chorus also starts with a C chord, with Elliott singing more high E's, just like the verse. It's not really until the 3rd chord in F that we've clearly shifted to C major. The following move from F to G, 4 to 5 in the key of C, cements us in C major until we go back to the verse. After all this, Elliott Smith still has one more tonal trick up his sleeve when we get to the ending. After one run of the 2nd chorus, identical to the first, we get a new chord, A major. The chord progression changes while the vocal line stays the same. The sound is unexpected and bright, and with the subsequent new progression of reordered chords, gives a totally different feeling to the words and melody. I'm really just scratching the surface here. There's a lot of concepts like chromatic mediance, relative major and minor, secondary dominance, and parallel harmony that you could apply here, and they'd all make for interesting discussion. In my previous video on the music theory of Elliott Smith, I talked about the value of approaching different styles of music differently. It's possible Elliott knew some or all of these concepts, but it seems unlikely. There's nothing at all wrong with nerding out about unusual uses of chords, but I think it's important to step back and notice the impact of the music in sound, not just in theory on a page. The magic of this song is how all these supposed tensions and ambiguities seem to just work. It's a beautiful, catchy song, and besides the slightly rough recording quality, I don't think anything stands out as off. To put it simply, both the chords and the lyrics are ambiguous. What's not ambiguous is the incredible specificity and attention to detail in how Elliott Smith voices these chords throughout the song. Here's a full playthrough now with chord charts, and if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to catch the rest of the Either Or series. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time for track 2, Alameda.
All right, second take of that.